What is happening, everybody? It is time for another MLB Live Before Lock, followed by NBA Live Before Lock and the post-lock show. Myself and Josh are going to be watching the NBA playoff games tonight. We'll be sweating it out as well as paying attention to our DFS lineups, looking for some bets that we like. And as you guys are watching this baseball show, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Show is also live over on Playback, as will be the NBA show. So something else to keep in mind if you guys want to be watching it over there. See Malukar, one of the first people in the chat. What's up, Malukar? And also RBC Brian says, let's hit some homers today, boys. We are sponsored today by Sleeper, so we'll be talking about them a little bit as we go. They do have a free square, which is available not only to new users, but existing users as well. It's good for today. It's good for tomorrow. Jalen Brunson over 0.5 points. So go check that out over at Sleeper if you guys haven't already. Matt, what's happening, man?
Nothing. Happy to get on here with you. I did not play the early slate. Did you?
I did not play the early slate. I was busy with meetings and whatnot. It was a shitty 3-game slate, so it wasn't something I really had all that much interest in. I don't even know what the scores of the games were or if it's even done at this point.
Same. So I'm excited to get on here. I had a little FOMO from not playing it, but I was busy myself. So excited to get on here and talk the main slate with you.
All right. So the Cardinals, I pulled it up right here. Cardinals beat the Diamondbacks 5-1. And then we've got 2 games ongoing. The Mets are up 3-0 on the Giants, and the Orioles are up 1-0 on the Angels. So I'm sure there's a bunch of people who played that slate. But no, I've just been focused in on the MLB slate today, and then I'll be building lineups for NBA after this as well. We had an interesting baseball slate last night, which actually ended up going pretty well for me. I got the Colorado Rockies came through. I was the only person who stacked the Rockies in the aluminum bat, the 2-2-2 tournament yesterday, the single inch. I was the only one. I got players like 0.5% owned on the individual hitters. How did last night go for you?
Well, I played Houston, so it did not go well. And if the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results, call me insane. So yeah, Houston let down. I mean, they've been a really big letdown all year. So no real shocker.
Yeah, they were. The one thing that was kind of surprising to me about
they were not popular,
which is not going to be the case for today, is the Padres ended up being really not all that popular. And that was why when I was going back and looking at the post-contest sims and reviewing the slate from last night, Padres stacks in hindsight ended up looking really good because they ended up picking up less ownership than was otherwise expected. So a couple of things that were weird to me about the slate. One of them was the low ownership on the Padres. Another one of it, too, was Pablo Lopez, who I see Devin Neiman in the chat said he had 100% Pablo Lopez last night. It wasn't so much that Pablo Lopez didn't have the best fantasy result. It was more so how he got there because he really only made one bad pitch the entire start. Gave up the home run to Eloy Jimenez that accounted for all of the runs scored against him. But he only threw 76 pitches. I still haven't been able to figure out why he only threw 76 pitches because outside of that home run he allowed, like, he pitched fairly well. Did you see anything as to why his pitch count was so low?
I did not. That was baffling to me. Because it wasn't like it seemed like he had gotten out of the trouble and then they still pulled him early. So no, I was very surprised to see that as well and have not seen anything on it today.
And if I'm remembering correctly, I could be incorrect on this, but didn't he have one more decent inning after he allowed the 3-run home run, or am I remembering?
That's what I think too. I'm pretty sure he had one more decent inning after that 3-run homer Eloy inning. I know the 3-run homer happened with no outs, so maybe I'm remembering that wrong, but I'm with you.
Okay, yeah. So that's what ended up happening. So he gave up the 3 runs in the 4th inning. He only pitched 4, but yeah. So you're right. That's what it is. That's why I was misremembering. So a couple guys get on base. Eloy hits the home run, and then he just shut down innings. Struck out a couple of guys. If I remember correctly, struck out 2 out of 3, and then he got pulled after that. After it seemed it was very weird. You just don't see that often. 3 good innings from him. Couple guys on base to start the 4th inning. Gives up the home run, and then shuts down the side, and then he was just done for the day at a low pitch count. So that was definitely a very odd result, but also kind of speaks to the amount of variance that exists in MLB DFS and why we're often looking for low-owned spots. Like when I talked about the Colorado Rockies yesterday, there was never a single point where I wanted to watch the Rockies because I thought they were good or because I thought they were likely to be good. It was just based on the ownership and some of the leverage we were getting there. And we'll be looking for some more of those spots today. If you guys have any questions for us, if you got super chats, leave those into YouTube. If you have any questions for us in Discord, it is one of the perks of being a stochastic sub. me in Discord. We'll be answering all those questions as we go here. Let's start by talking about the high-end pitching options, Matt, because I want to refresh the ownership here to make sure that nothing has changed on that end. But we have, for projected ownership, Joe Ryan is coming in at 41% ownership. We've got Clark Schmidt at 39%. That's your real chalky pitchers. We got Ronaldo Lopez, 26% owned, John Gray at 21%. But let's start by talking about Joe Ryan, who I know he's the most rostered player on the entire slate. The chalk of the night at 40% projected ownership. I actually thought it was going to be quite a bit higher when I was looking at the slate yesterday because the pitching options are pretty weak. And then also, like, the pricing is overall pretty soft. I actually thought we were going to see Joe Ryan kind of close to 60% owned. Are you surprised to see that he is only 40% owned?
I'll be surprised if I look in the contest have started and that he's only 40% owned. Yeah, I also think that will be higher. It is a price thing, though. Like, he's really expensive where everyone else is not.
Yeah, he is. There is a price gap, but at the same time, too, I mean, I look at the other pitchers and, he's $1,500 more expensive than Clark Schmidt, but Joe Ryan's quite a bit better than Clark Schmidt. Than the other guys here, it's like Ronaldo Lopez. All right, he's $1,200 more expensive than Ronaldo Lopez, but it's quite a bit better than Ronaldo Lopez as well. So I know we talked about it yesterday with Pablo Lopez. We ended up calling him a good piece of chalk, and then he ended up not scoring like negative fantasy points, where it was a total disaster, but he certainly wasn't winning anybody tournaments yesterday on his own. I still like going back to the low with a chalky Joe Ryan today, even at his ownership. How about for yourself?
Yeah, I don't care about the ownership here. I'm willing to get different elsewhere. I want to keep picking on the White Sox. I imagine if Lopez had gone 2 more innings in that start yesterday, he would have been fine. One bad pitch is what it is. I'll go right back to Ryan.
And once again, a big part of this has to do not just that he's a good matchup against the White Sox, but Joe Ryan himself is good. The other options also aren't all that great. And even if you want to say, like, hey, I really want to get to Clark Schmidt, for instance, you're not even getting an ownership discount there. Clark Schmidt's also projected for 40% ownership. This morning, I was doing this strategy show with Lofty, and my expectation was as we got closer to lock, the ownership on Joe Ryan would go up. It would come down on Clark Schmidt. It hasn't been the case. It's just kind of held the same. So where things are right now, my preference would be to be a little bit overweight to the field on Joe Ryan and maybe a little bit underweight to the field on Clark Schmidt, just based on what these guys' ownerships are. We don't have a pivot to talk about in the high end because there's, like you said, a big price gap. We've got Joe Ryan is 10,400, and then your next most expensive starting pitcher is Bryce Miller at 9,400. So he really exists in a price tier of his own, Joe Ryan. So the question isn't really, do you pivot off somebody with Joe Ryan? It's just, are you willing to pay the price in the ownership or not? For Matt and I, the answer is going to be yes on both accounts. And you play him in cash games as well. Cash games, super simple at pitcher today. FanDuel, you're playing Joe Ryan. DraftKings, Joe Ryan and Clark Schmidt. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I don't think it's even a question. Just lock those guys in and move on.
So let's talk about the pitchers who are 8,600 through 9,400. That is going, actually, let's include John Gray in this too. So all the pitchers that we haven't talked about in the 8K and the 9K range. Bryce Miller, Ronaldo Lopez, Clark Schmidt, Garrett Crochet, John Gray. We've got those 5 pitchers. And if we're looking at the ownership on these guys, the most popular, Clark Schmidt, is 39% owned. The least popular, Bryce Miller, only coming in at 3% ownership. And then everybody else is somewhere in between. John Gray, 21%, Crochet, 18%. Ronaldo Lopez is up to 26%. Pretty big number for Ronaldo Lopez at that price point. So considering where these guys are, let's talk about the chalk in Clark Schmidt. What do you want to do with him relative to his ownership? Because Clark Schmidt isn't bad, but he's not exactly one of the best pitchers in baseball. It's not too often you'll see Clark Schmidt as a somewhat pay-up option, project for 40% ownership.
Yeah, I'm good on that. Like, I'm totally fine with Ryan at 10-4 against this White Sox team, but you can miss me with Clark Schmidt as like the highest owned pitcher on the slate, even in a good spot against Oakland. I prefer Ryan's spot. This is one where I can definitely see myself, or I will get different. I don't want to play every popular player. I'm fine with Ryan. I'll get away from Schmidt.
Here's something a lot of people are going to do today. They're going to play Joe Ryan. They're going to play Clark Schmidt. And then they're going to stack the Padres or maybe the Toronto Blue Jays, which on paper, that's going to get you the lineup that projects for the most fantasy points. But you're going to be competing with almost all the lineups in the field if you're going ahead and doing that. So I'm not going to tell you it's a bad lineup construction on paper. It is just way too popular for me. So that's why when I'm looking at Clark Schmidt, I'd rather be underweights to the field on him, because if I like getting to Joe Ryan, and then if I also am trying to get myself to Clark Schmidt comparable with the field, I'm just going to run into issues where it's going to be really hard to make some unique sorts of lineups. Because I don't know about you, Matt, and not to get too far ahead of ourselves and talk about stacks, there are not any crazy low-owned stacks that I'm liking today.
I probably am different with you on that. I certainly understand where you're coming from because all the high-owned stacks are coming in under-owned. So I get that.
Yeah, we'll talk more about stacks when we get there, but I just want to say that it is something that impacts my decision at pitcher, just because if I'm going to like, and I'm not saying like I'm only playing the chalkiest of chalk stacks, but even the less chalky stacks that I'm liking, it's not like they're 1 or 2% on. Those stacks don't exist on this. So like even ownership is going against Joe Ryan today for the White Sox, more so than I was expecting. I thought this would be a slate where maybe there'd be like a 1% on White Sox stack and get Joe Ryan at like 60% on. But even the White Sox are projected like 4% ownership as a stack. So that does inhibit some of what I could do at pitcher by only jamming the chalk. And with that in mind, I feel like I have to get myself different in some places at pitcher. One of them is going to be underweight to the field on Clark Schmidt. In this price range, who is your preferred pivot off of Clark Schmidt, if anybody?
Couple guys. I think it's for me, Crochet and John Gray. I like both of them. They're coming in with similar ownership, similar top 2 pitcher percentage. I like the matchup for Crochet more, but both these teams can strike out a lot. So I think both these guys are firmly in play for me. How about yourself?
Relative to his ownership, Crochet is my favorite pitcher on the entire slate. And it's another thing I brought up this morning, and just not that much has changed. I thought that we could see some of the pitching ownership kind of rotate a little bit, but it just didn't. All the guys are within a couple percentage points of where they were at this morning. So I don't have any concerns about Garrett Crochet becoming more popular like I thought could have happened this morning. But if he is actually going to be 18% owned today on a slate where we don't overall have the best pitching, and then it's also kind of hard to find spots to be unique, I want to go to Garrett Crochet, who, if you just look at his ERA, yeah, it's not great at 5.61, but if you look at the underlying numbers, this has been one of the best pitchers in baseball so far this year. He has a 2.19 expected ERA, a 2.86 FIP. He's transitioned to a starter role really well after being a reliever in the past. He's only walking 5.8% of the hitters he's facing. He's striking out 32.7. He's shown an ability to work deep into games. The reason his ERA is high is because of bad sequencing. His strand rate is extremely high. Anytime he's allowed hits in a game, like let's say that Garrett Crochet pitches 6 innings and gives up 5 hits. The way his season is gone is all of those 5 hits will be in the same inning, and it'll shut down the teams in the other innings. So that's why I got him at a 55% strand rate. Half of the runners that are getting on base against him have ended up scoring. So that's something that is not going to continue going forward for his career. He has a 72% strand rate. That's right in line with league average. And once that strand rate normalizes, there's going to be a lot less runs scored against Crochet. We talked about the strikeout upside and how many strikeouts that he's producing this year. And now he's also got a matchup against the Twins offense that strikes out a bunch and just hasn't been very great this year overall. So Garrett Crochet, with him not being popular, that's the guy I like the most relative to his ownership. That's my favorite pivot off of Clark Schmidt, is getting to Garrett Crochet. You're getting somebody who's $300 less expensive. We do have Clark Schmidt projected quite a bit better in our top pitchers tool. I just don't see it that way for me personally. I know it is hard to project Crochet because he only has 5 career starts, but I think this is a very talented pitcher who's going to be a top of the rotation starter. So give me Crochet in this price range.
Yeah, I'm with you all over. I think that certainly Crochet comes with more downside here just because of the spot, the unknown with him. But as far as upside goes, I think Crochet might have higher upside. So I get it for sure.
Yeah, and of all the pitchers we talked about in this price range, he's the second least popular. The only guy projected for less ownership is Bryce Miller. Now, Bryce Miller is a very difficult matchup against the Texas Rangers. Logan Gilbert was very successful in this spot yesterday, also at low ownership. I didn't end up playing any of Logan Gilbert yesterday. Bryce Miller at 3% owned. He's not someone I'm going to look to in single entry, but in large field tournaments, I do expect he's somebody I'll be a little bit overweight to the 3% mark just because it's so low in like the $3 150 max or something like that. Yeah, I could see myself getting to, 10% of Bryce Miller or something like that, but not somebody who's really a priority for me. This is more of a large field tournament play. But what do you make of Bryce Miller just 3% owned? Do you think maybe the ownership comes in higher? Is he too low owned? What do you make of him?
It probably comes in like somewhere around 5 to 7%. Still going to be really low owned. Still love it in tournaments as a contrarian option. Much easier to get to, as you said, in like large field where you're making a bunch of lineups because of the sacrifices you have to make to get there.
I want to talk about something that I see Tolga A in chat brought up, because I think there's a very relevant strategy talking point to this. He said, I guess we should always stack against the highest owned pitcher at this point, which honestly, if you blindly did that in MLB this year, I'm kind of bullshitting here. I'm talking out of my ass. I think if you blindly stacked against the most highly owned pitcher every slate this year, you would have been profitable. Now, last night, if you stacked against Pablo Lopez, it wouldn't have gone well because basically all you would have gotten points out of was Eloy Jimenez. But you could have stacked against Michael King and had success. And something we've seen this year with all of the pitcher injuries, the ownership still has to go somewhere. And as a result, you just get massive amounts of ownership going to okay pitchers, like somebody like Clark Schmidt today, who I'm not necessarily dying to stack the Oakland A's against Clark Schmidt, mostly because the Oakland A's are actually picking up some ownership right now. But there are spots where you're just seeing, okay pitchers projected for like 40% ownership in spots that have downside. I do think there's more merit to stacking against chalk pitchers this year than there's ever been in DFS years in the past. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I do. I think it was always in play, but now with the injuries and the worst pitchers getting ownership, it just makes it even more viable. So tonight, I think that it's viable here. I don't like Miami, Oakland, or the White Sox, but no one does. Now it's a smaller slate, so all those teams are getting a little bit of love, but not a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to keep talking about last night's slate, but one of the main reasons that I stacked the Colorado Rockies is because Michael King was projected for north of 30% ownership. Michael King is okay. He's a solid pitcher, not great. He's pitching in Coors Field. The Rockies were projected for 1% ownership. You just couldn't convince me that if the slate played out 100 times, the Rockies wouldn't be the highest scoring team more than once out of all those times. And I think Michael King was going to be optimal like a third of the time either. So there was a lot of reasons to go to that team in that spot, the Colorado Rockies, even if they are a bad offense because of the kind of leverage you are getting. And I do think that's something we should look more of going forward, is just who are these pitchers that are not great, that are picking up a lot of ownership. Got a question in the chat here from Einsteinium. This is from Discord. And he's saying John Gray is a tough matchup, but Seattle is striking out a ton against righties. Should be over or under his projected ownership? John Gray tonight, Matt, project for 21% ownership at home against the Seattle Mariners. He is $8,300 on DraftKings. If you're playing a bunch of lineups, would you say that ownership on John Gray is too high, too low, or just about right?
I think it's a little bit too low. I'd be over the field. He's definitely on the short list for me. He's in good form right now. He started off the season pitching not great, back-to-back really good starts, and then they just used him out of the bullpen because they were short on pitchers, and he was dominant against Atlanta. Yeah, it's a tough spot, but Seattle strikes out a ton. I'm interested.
I'm going to be a little bit underweight to him. I think the ownership's about right, though. About right. Well, people seem to be very, very into Dalton Varsho, because I've seen a couple of times somebody said, has Varsho homered yet today? And then Craig Coakley in chat said Varsho go deep. So either people are very interested in playing Dalton Varsho in DFS, or they're really into his sex life. So something about Dalton Varsho is people talking about him in chat, but seems like he's going to be a popular home run pick for later. But John Gray, yeah, I have 19% of him right now, so just slightly underweight to the field, but I think the ownership is about efficient.
I get it. That's fair. I mean, I think it's about right with him, with guys like him and Crochet, but I'll be over on them because I want to be under on Schmidt.
And if we go back to talking about some of the other pitchers on the slate, is there anything else in this price range that really stands out to you? We didn't talk on Ronaldo Lopez, who's 26% owned. It's a good matchup for him against the Marlins, but that also is another guy that I think is a little bit too popular. 26% ownership on Ronaldo Lopez when he's $9,200. that's almost always going to be a spot that I want to be underweight to, kind of regardless of the circumstances.
Yeah, same. I know he's been good this year, but I think a lot of it's been smoke and mirrors. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I'm not paying full price for him at ownership. No way.
Yeah, maybe the Marlins. Let's see. Am I getting to Marlins stacks? I am not. Maybe that's a team I want to force myself to get to a little bit because of all the ownership going to Ronaldo Lopez. Not necessarily for single entry because people aren't going to play Lopez in single entry. It's going to be all Clark Schmidt and Joe Ryan picking up ownership in single entry. So I don't think that's the spot to be stacking the Marlins. But large field tournaments, you can make some consideration for it just because of all the ownership going to Lopez. But I have Lopez right now in like 15% a lineup. So somebody who I'm going to be underweight to the field to, but just because of how popular his matchup's clearly good against the Marlins, but you got a ceiling price point for him and also a ton of ownership going to Ronaldo Lopez. Anything else you want to talk about from the pitchers that are in this range?
No. And I get your point about stacking the Marlins in single entry. It doesn't look as appealing because he won't be as popular, but I think he will get love. So like they're still on my short list there.
Let's talk about the punt pitching options, which are terrible. We've got Jameson Taillon picking up some ownership. He's 17% owned. Now he's gotten a little bit more popular since Lofty and I did the show this morning because I think he was 14% owned. We did the strategy show, and Spencer Arrighetti now at 14% ownership himself. Everybody else in this price range, sub 10% owned. Matt Waldron's picking up 7% ownership. This is how shitty the pitching is today on the low end. Matt Waldron is 7% owned in Coors Field. I know 7% doesn't seem like a big number, but I don't know. Matt Waldron's been 7% on any other start in his entire career. Now all of a sudden he is when he's pitching at Coors Field. So Matt Waldron, he's 7% on. Alec Marsh is 6% on, pitching against the Toronto Blue Jays. And then we've got Ty Block as well as Kyle Tyler, Joe Boyle. These guys also picking up low ownership, although even Joe Boyle is 5% ownership against the Yankees just because of the lack of options here on the low end. But let's start by talking about Jameson Taillon at $7,500. He's the most popular cheap SP2 that we have on DraftKings. What do you think of the ownership going to Jameson Taillon? Is that a guy who you like getting to at his ownership and price point?
No, but I get it. Like he's not for me. He's getting too much ownership. He's just a byproduct of the slate not having options. Houston hasn't been good. As I said earlier, I'll still go back to Houston. I know it's not a great spot for them weather-wise, etc. They've let down a bunch recently. Taillon has only made one start so far this year. And we've seen a lot of inconsistencies with him in the past. I don't think he's a bad pitcher. I don't think he's particularly good either, though. I'd rather play Arrighetti at $1,000 cheaper.
Same. And that was actually going to be the next thing I was going to say is that if I had my choice here, which we do, because nobody's telling me I have to play certain things in DFS. We play whatever the hell we want. Just have to keep it within the salary limits. I can't play Padres stacks with a secondary stack of the Braves and then play, Bryce Miller or play Bryce Miller and Joe Ryan a pitcher. And you can't just play all the most expensive guys. But beyond that, I mean, we've got Spencer Arrighetti with a 15% chance to be one of the top two scoring pitchers on the slate, 13% chance for Jameson Taillon. And then also you've got Arrighetti is $1,000 less expensive. I know that the Astros offense hasn't been great to this point this season. I'm still going forward. The Astros offense is going to be better than the Cubs offense. So I think it's a better spot for Arrighetti than it is for Taillon. He's also cheaper. He projects better. So yeah, give me the salary savings on Arrighetti. I'm not dying to roster him on the slate. But as we're getting closer to lock, it's becoming more and more apparent to me. I'm going to have more of them than the 13.8% projected ownership that the field is at.
Yeah, honestly, like he looks kind of good here. And I don't care too much about like one singular batter in MLB. We've talked about this a bunch, but no Cody Bellinger does not hurt his case at all. So just again, he's a byproduct of the slate, not having great options, but he's cheaper than Taillon, not getting the love and in a better spot. I get it. Taillon's at home, but even JP France, like outside of that first inning last night, he was not horrible.
Yeah, and this, once again, the Astros offense, it really has sucked this year, but there's so many talented hitters. They have such a big sample size of being good hitters as well. Kyle Tucker, Yordan Alvarez, Jose Altuve, and I know not all of them have been terrible this year. Like Yordan Alvarez has had a bunch of really good games. It's going to be a good offense going forward, though. And once again, everything is relative. right? Is Arrighetti good? Absolutely not. I bet him under 4.5 strikeouts this morning, right? So not somebody who I'm super high on, but that's still kind of a better outlook than a lot of these other cheap pitchers. If I'm only picking one cheap pitcher to roster, all things being considered, it's Arrighetti for me. Is it Arrighetti for you amongst all these options? There's just somebody else with really low ownership that maybe you like as well.
Oh, it's easily Arrighetti for me here. Like the question for me now is, do I like Arrighetti more than guys like Gray and Crochet? Like clearly not as a pitcher, but as his price point, when I don't love either of those guys either. The only lock at pitcher I see is Joe Ryan.
Joe Ryan, pretty clearly the best pitcher on the slate. These other cheap guys, like I'll get to some of these guys in like 2, 3, 4, 5% of lineups just through the Sims tool. And that's what's going to happen when you play a bunch of lineups in baseball. But it's nobody I'd recommend that you guys go play if you're playing 1, 2, 3 lineups. Like I don't think you don't have to play Alec Marsh. You don't have to play Matt Waldron. You have to play Jamison Tyone, Joe Boyle, Kyle Tyler, Ty Block. You don't have to play any of these guys. We're only playing a couple of lineups. Would you agree with that? Or is there one of these guys you think at low ownership really is a good consideration that somebody playing 3 lineups should be playing?
It's only Arrighetti in consideration for me. That's it. No one else even a thought in my mind.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm going to check out Discord to see what other questions we have in. And then after we answer these, I see there's a couple stack questions, which I see them, guys. I'll be answering them in like 5, 8, 10 minutes when we start talking about some of the offenses and the stacks. We're also going to build lineups in the lineup generator here in a second. So Jordan, after I answer one question here for Einsteinium, we'll go and we'll look at stacks or sorry, look at the lineup generator and build lineups in that. But Einsteinium says, if Boyle will Boyle throw strikes today? He has good stuff, but can't find the zone. All of the information we have on Joe Boyle to this point is that he will not throw strikes.
Yeah, I mean, his stuff is not awful for sure, but he can't throw strikes.
So his average fastball velocity this year, it is pulling it up. I remember it's being like the mid upper 90s. It is, 97 miles per hour is the average fastball velocity for Joe Boyle this year. And he is walking a cool 14% of the hitters he faces, which is not out of line with his minor league stats. He was walking guys in the minor leagues at a similar clip. And keep in mind, these are clearly worse hitters that have worse plate discipline. Joe Boyle last year in AAA had a 16.7% walk rate. In AA with the A's, he had a 10.1% walk rate. He also spent time with the Reds last year. So with the Reds in AA last year, he had a 19.4% walk rate. Then you go back to 2022. In AA, he had a 21% walk rate. In A-ball in 2022, he had a 20% walk rate. You know, there's randomness in individual games that are being played in the MLB, but all of the data on Joe Boyle says he's not going to likely throw strikes.
Yeah, I mean, again, anything can happen in one MLB game, but that's not really how we want to play it. So it's a risky proposition playing Joe Boyle here.
He has at least 3 walks in 3 out of his 4 starts this year, which also inhibits his ability to work deep into games. He has gone past 5 innings once. That actually happened to be one of those starts where he had 4 walks still. But, I mean, you look at the overall numbers against the Guardians, he had 4 walks to 3 strikeouts. Against the Nationals, he was okay in that start. He had 5 strikeouts to 1 walk. Start before against the Tigers, 3 walks, 6 strikeouts. And then his opening day start against the Red Sox, which, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say his opening day start, the first start he made of the season, which you remember when we talked about that and we're like, why is Joe Boyle super popular? And the answer ended up being for absolutely no reason at all. He never should have been popular, but he got lit up in that start. He pitched 2 2/3 innings. He gave up 8 runs, walked 4 guys, had 4 strikeouts, and he was like 25% owned on that slate. There's nothing I've seen out of Joe Boyle that's really that much of a positive outside of the fact that he throws pretty hard. He has good stuff, so he has potential for some strikeouts, but the walks are so inevitable for him that if he's only able to pitch 4 or 5 innings in a lot of his starts, he's going to put guys on base. It really does cap his DFS upside. So Joe Boyle, not really somebody I'm all that interested in Einsteinium. Any other talking points you have at pitcher, Matt? If not, we'll look at the FanDuel side of pitchers really quick, and they'll build lineups and lineup generator.
Not really. I guess the only thing I'll say about Boyle is like I don't like him either, but on a slate like this, it's not crazy because he's so cheap and all the other options aren't really any good either.
FanDuel pitching, we've got Clark Schmidt, believe it or not, more popular than Joe Ryan, considerably so. And we've got Clark Schmidt project for 29% ownership, Joe Ryan going for 20% ownership. And let's see, Iotai, what is that noise? I don't know what noise you're talking about. I don't hear anything. Leaf blower. I don't know. I haven't heard anything the entire show.
It's definitely outside my window.
Oh, was it? I
Yeah,
never heard it come across. That's crazy. They were able to hear it. But anyway, FanDuel ownership here. Joe Ryan is, I get he's 10,600, which is kind of pricey. I can't believe that Clark Schmidt is that much more popular than him on FanDuel, though. I think that's a very reasonable pivot to go to, just Joe Ryan instead of Clark Schmidt on FanDuel.
100% with you.
If you're looking to get contrarian at pitcher on FanDuel, is there anybody who stands out to you? I think I might know who you're going to answer, but basically any non-Joe Ryan or Clark Schmidt pitcher is going to be somewhat contrarian because nobody else is projected for more than 12% ownership. So on the FanDuel side of things, if you weren't going to play Joe Ryan in a lineup, is there somebody else you like to get to who's going to be less popular?
Yeah, it's our boy Arrighetti. I mean, 6K, like coming in with leverage in the top pitcher tool. I mean, I don't even think it's a question for me. How about yourself?
Yeah, that is going to be John Gray for me. Gray is 12% owned and only $7,500 on FanDuel. We know the strikeout upside that he has individually, as well as the fact the Mariners strike out a whole bunch. So I think the ownership on DraftKings is about efficient, but he's relatively less popular on FanDuel and a lot less expensive as well, $7,500. So if you want to be cheaper and contrarian on FanDuel, John Gray is going to be the guy that I want to be going to. Let me go back and just make sure that there were no other pitcher questions. And none for now. So let's go ahead and build lineups in the lineup generator now, Jordan. We'll see what pops up there. And also, we've got a deal going on right now. If you guys want to check out the MLB lineup generator, sales starting today. It's only going to be going on for a few days. If you guys have been looking to sign up for the MLB lineup generator, sign up now with the link that we have below. The promo code's already loaded in, but for reference, it is promo code DOUBLE. You're going to get access to the lineup generator for $5. In the lineup generator, which you guys have seen us use on shows, you could build lineups in here. You could put some inputs as well to make them a little bit more customized to what you like. You could lock in players that you want to lock in. If you want to, you could also take players out of the pool. If you want to build contrarian lineups, build contrarian lineups. Or if you want to build chalky lineups, it's going to build chalky lineups for you as well. And then if you want to change them after the fact, it also includes our player projections and our ownership projections. So you can make swaps to those individual players. And all this is available to you for just $5 now when you sign up using the link below and that promo code DOUBLE. And also keep in mind, any package you sign up for at Stokastic also comes with access to the Discord channel. So if you ever want to ask us questions either on a show or maybe some point during the day, later on the day when we're not on the air, you could always hit us up in the Discord channel. I'm usually pretty readily available in there to answer any questions or just do general strategy stuff when people hit me up in DMs and want to know how something works. So sign up for the lineup generator package, link below, promo code DOUBLE, $5. The reason the promo code is $5, want to guess, Matt? There's a specific reason I set it up that way.
I feel like I'm going to make myself sound stupid, so you tell me.
Because a double is 5 fantasy points on DraftKings.
Oh.
I thought it was like a fun gimmick to do when we did it. So double, 5 fantasy points on DraftKings. That's the reasoning for it. We'll start here. We'll build lineups on DraftKings. We'll build lineups for FanDuel after we search these ones out. So Jordan, start with the DraftKings lineups. And let's go all stack types. And let's go contrarian. I have a feeling it is still going to just jam the Padres for us, but I want to see if maybe there's a way we could get off of some of the Padres. Oh, all good. Yeah. Jordan's just going to clear it and build some new ones. So we're using the updated data. And already I'm seeing the first few lineups were all Padres stacked. There's no way to get away from the Padres in large field tournaments today, apparently. We are just getting to all of the Padres. If you look at our stack exposures, 85% of our lineups are Padres stacks here, followed by the Braves in 30% of lineups, the Rockies in 15%, Blue Jays, Mariners each in 10% of lineups. the lineup generator jamming the Padres for us, it is something that is really hard to get away from in large field tournaments, Matt. If you were playing one lineup, not in single entry, but a large field tournament, I think you would have to say the team to go to is the Padres, would it not be?
Yeah, I mean, it changes things when you're playing one lineup because they still will be the highest owned, but your point's well taken, and I have no arguments with it. So yeah, they look like the best team to just get to overall in large field stuff.
Yeah, I've got data refreshed on my screen just to make sure I'm looking at the most recent data. And the ownership has come down on the Padres over the course of the day, which another one, I thought they were going to get more popular as we went along here, but the Padres are projected for 14.6% ownership. I thought, because earlier in the day, we didn't have a confirmed starter for the Rockies. And I thought, hey, Ty Block is starting. Like that has to mean that people are going to get to the Padres more. Ended up not being the case. People did not get more to the Padres just because Ty Block is starting. So we got the Padres just 14.6% owned with 22.6% top stack odds. This is the number one most under-owned stack in the top stacks tools for us. So it's going to be a team that the lineup generator is going to get you a ton of. The Sims are going to get you a ton of, and I don't really have an issue with it. For single entry, we'll talk about maybe if there's a different direction we want to go. But if you look at the individual hitters we're getting exposure to, our most rostered hitter, Rosario, second most rostered hitter, Campensaro, followed by Azukar, Tatis, Xander Bogaerts, Ha-Seong Kim. All of our top rostered hitters are coming from the San Diego Padres. It's a team that's very difficult to get away from as far as pitcher exposures. Clark Schmidt showed up in a ton of lineups. Doesn't totally surprise me. I did think we would get to a little bit more of Joe Ryan, but we did put it on the contrarian setting. So we did get to a good chunk of Spencer Arrighetti there as a contrarian option. Keep scrolling down. I'm curious to see if we got to any other pitchers in a meaningful way. There's Crochet, a little bit overweight to Crochet in 20% of lineups, 15% of Ty owned, but nothing really too significant there. But yeah, lots of the San Diego Padres, and that is a team that is going to be picking up all kinds of ownership in my particular lineups for today. Anything else you noticed that's standing out to you, Matt?
Not really. It looks pretty much right on with what our tools would say is appropriate. So I'm with it.
Yeah, you'd have to scroll down pretty far until you start to see some of the non-Padres hitters really show up predominantly there. So see like some of the Seattle guys. You got some of the Blue Jays hitters. Blue Jays are also going to be a team that picks up some decent amount of ownership today. But if you guys are going to play a chalk offense today, it does look like the Padres are a team to get to. And then as far as the Blue Jays go, they are the second most popular team on the slate. They are pretty favorably priced, which makes them easy to get to with top pitchers. Are you surprised to see that the Blue Jays have almost identical ownership to the Padres now?
Yeah, and the Yankees too. Like, I'm not sure it will come in that way when all is said and done in the stuff I play. But as of the tools, I mean, the Padres are like they stand out as the clear top team to get to in tournaments with the leverage they're providing.
Yeah, it is lots of exposure that we're getting to there for the San Diego Padres. Scroll back to the top there, Jordan. I want to see what was it? Was it like 90% Rosario? Campensaro is in half our lineups. Azukar is in about half. Same with Tatis and Xander Bogaerts. Let's see what we're getting to on FanDuel. Let's see if that's any similar or different. And let's do same settings for FanDuel, all stack types and contrarian lineups. Yeah, it's not lock anybody in. And we'll see what shows up here for FanDuel as far as the FanDuel ownership is concerned for stacks. We've got 15% ownership going to the Padres, so slightly more popular on FanDuel, but nothing all that crazy. And then we've also got 10% ownership going to the Braves, 12% to the Yankees, 12% to the Blue Jays. So ownership's a little bit more spread out on FanDuel. There's a bunch of teams picking up double-digit ownership. In the lineup generator, it gave us 57% of the Braves, 47% of the Padres. Still a lot of Padres, but not nearly the same kind of exposure we got to them on the DraftKings side of things. Yankees in 25% of lineups. The Rockies are there in 20% of lineups. What do you make of some of these other stacks that are showing up on FanDuel, Matt? And in particular, the Padres aren't showing up in quite as many lineups for us.
I think it's just a case of lost it. the ownership actually looks identical to DraftKings. So it is a little bit surprising to me, although teams like the Yankees and Blue Jays are just even easier to get to. Yeah, the Blue Jays seem to be picking up a lot of love on both sites. I get it, but I don't really agree with it.
And another thing too about the Padres, they're also more expensive on FanDuel, which does make them, while the top stack odds and the ownership are about similar on FanDuel compared to DraftKings, the top value odds are much lower. So that is something that makes it a little bit harder for them to show up in quite the same rate of lineups that we did on the DraftKings side of things. But also something of note here, we just got the starting lineup for the Padres. It is a little bit different than expected. Higashioka is starting at catcher. So that is definitely going to change some of these lineups because if you guys remember on the DK side of things, Kaminseno was showing up in a ton of lineups for us. So this lineup that we have here for the Padres, Bogarts, Tatis, Profar, Cronenworth, then Profar batting fourth, Ha-Seong Kim. Then we got Merrill, Rosario, Azakar, and then Higashioka batting ninth there. So the San Diego Padres, I just realized the Padres, you remember last year they had Gary Sanchez at catcher. This year they've got Higashioka. Just, I guess, whatever catcher washes out of the Yankees is going to land on the Padres. Is that the new deal?
Yeah, like I guess that's the new deal. This lineup sucks in the bottom half, but they're in core spacing, probably even worse pitching. So I still like them a lot.
Yeah, it's something, it could lower the top stack odds a little bit for this team. And then of course, if people are wondering where Manny Machado is, he is on the paternity list at the moment. I don't know exactly when they said that he's expected back, but shitty time to end up having a kid. You miss the Coors Field games already. Like, come on, kid, you're hurting Manny Machado's counting stats. It's hurting his earning potential. They're always expensive, those kids. I don't have any kids, but you see, they cost you in many ways when it comes to the wallet there. But yeah, that Padres lineup pretty weak towards the tail end of it. But like you said, it is a Coors Field game, and like Brendan Rodgers homered yesterday, grand slam in Coors Field yesterday. Anybody could end up having a big game, especially because the amount of players that are ultimately going to likely be getting on base. And then also on top of that, it's the starting pitching is terrible on both ends of the game. So I think that there's a lot of merit to going to the Padres, regardless of what that starting lineup ended up being there. And if you look at our individual hitter exposure here for FanDuel, Austin Riley and Michael Harris at the top, followed by Tatis, Rosario, Xander Bogaerts. Then we get to the pitchers here. Joe Ryan is showing up more predominantly on FanDuel in the contrarian lineups, 35% of them, which makes sense when we're building contrarian lineups, and he is projected for quite a bit less ownership than Clark Schmidt. Clark Schmidt, also we're getting ownership to him, but about even with the field here on FanDuel. And then my guy that I like before, John Gray, we're about double the field on John Gray on the FanDuel side of things. So that's going to do it for the lineup generator here, guys. And don't forget, if you want to sign up for it, promo code double, use that link we have below. This is a deal that is only available for people who watch our shows. We're not promoting it on the site. We're not promoting it on social media or anything. We're trying to do stuff that's exclusive to the people who watch the show because we think it's a fun way to give back to you guys. Just $5 for the lineup generator. Sign up, promo code double, using the link that we have below. Let's check out the Discord channel because there were a couple of questions that were coming to us about stacks, so we could see what it is that people are asking. First off, Sniffs1234 said, why did Gray only pitch 1 2/3 innings against Atlanta in his last start? Actually, it wasn't a start. He came out of the bullpen.
Yeah, they were short on pitchers, and he came out of the pen and was really, really good against Atlanta.
Only pitched 1 2/3 innings. Yeah, there wasn't like a real specific reason for it other than he didn't make a start. He just came out of the bullpen. It's a weird wrinkle to this slate. I'm not really putting that much stock into it. Maybe I should, though. Does this impact how deep you think he might work into the game, considering his last start was? Oh, sorry, I keep calling it a start. His last appearance was out of the bullpen.
No, so I looked into this a little bit. They had played 17 games in 17 days, and their manager had said their bullpen was really thin and a possible surprise could be coming. Him working out of the bullpen in between starts was the surprise. So I'm not worried about it at all.
It actually does seem like an interesting way for pitchers to get their work in, because pitchers, they get their bullpen sessions in, they throw 20, 30 pitches. Maybe that is something teams should do more, is have when pitchers are doing their workouts for middle or top of the rotation starters, why not have them throw those pitches in the middle of the game and just have them go out there and throw 20 pitches in one inning?
Yeah, I
Extra
mean,
value out of him. It would be
I'm
interesting.
surprised that teams haven't at least like thought about it or tried it at all. You know, we've seen like the openers and all that stuff. I don't know.
Be an interesting wrinkle. Be an interesting wrinkle. Question here from Sir Drake. Sir Drake says he likes the New York Yankees in single entry. He wants to know, how do you feel about the Yankees in single entry, Matt? Is that a stack that you would be looking for in a single entry field?
No, not for me, but I don't like hate them. I've picked on Boyle a bunch. The ownership is just there, and the Yankees are really expensive, so not my like favorite team to stack, but certainly not a bad one either.
My favorite single entry stack, I can't believe that it's this team again. The Colorado Rockies, even though they're projected for a little bit more ownership today, they are not going to be popular in single entry. This is the lowest owned team I have interest in. Like a significant amount of interest, because the way the ownership is spread out today, we've got, well, actually the Astros 4.6, because the Astros have come down. They were over 7% earlier today. So I'll amend that and say the Astros, our team, I also have some ownership, some interest in at their ownership. But the other teams that are not all that great on the low end here, like the White Sox, they're picking up 3% ownership against Joe Ryan. We got 3% ownership going to the A's against Clark Schmidt. So with these teams actually picking up some semblance of ownership, give me the Rockies at 6%, an easy matchup against Waldron, and it's still Coors Field. There's a lot of upside. I'm going to be going back to the Rockies again today. It's another team that I like being overweight to, Matt.
Yeah, in our tools, I wrote them up today as the top contrarian stack. Waldron is very hit or miss. He was awful in his last start. Surprised they're not getting more love, but it's the same case with them. They're expensive-ish, and they just don't really have names people want to roster. So they look really good to me. That's one of the teams I prefer over the Yankees.
I don't mind the Yankees in single entry because I don't think they're going to be popular. I do prefer the Rockies, but the reason I don't mind the Yankees, if you do really like them, Sir Drake, like you had said before, with all the ownership projected to go to Toronto and San Diego, and to a lesser extent Atlanta, I think that is going to account for like 3/4 of the single entry field ownership.
I agree. They're just not my favorite team. Like, I don't think they're going to be high owned, but there will be people who stack them just because it's a small slate and they're against Joe Boyle. But I like Houston. I know that the top stack tool isn't very high on them. Weather's not great. But you're not going to see a Houston team with this lineup this low owned very often. I know that they haven't been playing well, but I'll buy the dip here. I'm going to go right back to Houston. As I said earlier, I'm insane.
And then Einstein had a follow-up question for us about pitchers. He wanted to know, do we touch on Alec Marsh? Just not a good enough pitcher and too difficult of a matchup for me to want to get there. Now, with that said, I am going to be a little bit underweight, it looks like, to the Toronto Blue Jays. So I guess there's leverage there, but he's not good enough for me to want to actually want a roster.
Yeah, same.
As far as the other stacks go, talking about single entry, the Padres are going to be crazy popular in single entry, as are the Toronto Blue Jays. So this is where I do like to differentiate from the field. If somebody said they're playing Toronto or playing San Diego in a single entry tournament, I'd say, all right, I understand it. A little bit too much ownership for me personally. I'd rather go to, say, like the Colorado Rockies. Matt brought up the Houston Astros as a team to potentially get to. But all this ownership going to San Diego, we talked about how we think it's justified in large field tournaments. But Matt, what do you make of the ownership going to the Toronto Blue Jays? The second most popular stack on DraftKings, 13% owned, also really popular over on FanDuel. Good spot for them against Alec Marsh, but is the ownership too high?
Way too high. I mean, again, they're priced right and they're in a good spot against Marsh, but I would much rather play San Diego than them, clearly, as our top stack tool indicates. I'm not sure that the ownership will be exactly the same, but they look like the easiest team to cross off for me.
Yeah, I'm sure the Blue Jays, let's see, what's my current Toronto? Yeah, this seems about right. I have currently 8% stacks of them for my large field tournament. If I was entering them right now, that's what my allocation would be to them in 150. So like right around half the field is what I'm at with my Toronto ownership. It's not a team that I am like zeroing out or anything, but just less than the field when I'm considering that I think they are a little bit too popular. So that's why I'm going to be approaching the Toronto Blue Jays. The other popular stack we have is the Atlanta Braves. I also like the Atlanta Braves at their ownership. The one problem is going to be that they are very expensive, which makes it a little bit hard to get to them. But if I'm ranking all three of the popular stacks on the slate relative to ownership, Matt, it's 1 Padres, 2 Braves, 3 Blue Jays. Do you agree with those rankings?
I got no issues with those rankings. Padres, Braves, Blue Jays. Yeah, I think for me, it's like Padres, Braves, big drop off, Blue Jays, just ownership considered.
So now the other part of this is, I know you mentioned the Houston Astros. Is it fair to say that that's your favorite contrarian stack on the slate if we're looking at teams that are sub 5% owned right now?
It is. It is.
The other options are terrible.
Just not going to see Houston this low owned in a spot against a very average pitcher. And again, as you kind of mentioned, Houston has not been great this year, but a lot of their problems has been their pitching staff, getting them into big holes early. They've blown a ton of saves. The top of their lineup, Alvarez and Tucker, have still been 2 of the best hitters in the majors. Altuve's right there. Bregman's been awful, but he's hitting second today. Maybe that'll rejuvenate him. I'm going to, like I said, buy the dip on Houston, even though I know it's not a great spot and it's not likely to succeed, because when they succeed, this is a team that's going to hit home runs.
Here are all the teams we have that are sub 5% owned as a stack. The White Sox against Joe Ryan, not all that interested. Oakland against Clark Schmidt, not all that interested. The Kansas City Royals, the Chicago Cubs against Arrighetti. All right, maybe I can make some bit of a case for the Chicago Cubs. The Miami Marlins against Ronaldo Lopez. And then the Houston Astros against Jameson Taillon. These are all our low-owned offenses for the day in terms of like crazy low. And the next lowest owned team is the Rockies, and that is a team I like being overweight to. But to the point that you had brought up there is we've got an Astros team that has an okay matchup against Jameson Taillon, probably average-ish. But it's also a team that they're going to be better going forward. There's no way they could be worse than what they've been so far. They're not going to be the same as they're going to get better going forward. And then all the other options for low ownership, it's bad offenses generally and teams in tough matchups. The one exception being the Chicago Cubs, but I don't think the Cubs offense is as good as the Astros offense. So yeah, I think by default, you just kind of play the process of elimination. And if you're playing a contrarian offense, it's going to be Houston today.
Yeah, the only other one, well, not the only other one, but another one that looks okay to me is Kansas City. They're underowned. They're really expensive. I respect Yadier Rodriguez a lot. I think he's got a really live arm. Not sure how much he's going to pitch here. And Bowden Francis has been very hittable. The problem with KC is they're expensive, like 1 through 7, real pricey.
Yeah, if we look at the top value odds, a lot of times these shitty offenses that are low owned, they'll at least have really high top value odds. That's not even the case today. There's a top value score that's kind of decent on Oakland because of how cheap they are, but still, it's not really a great spot that we want to be looking to get to. So that kind of runs us through all of the offenses. Anything else you want to talk about as far as stacks go, Matt?
No, I think that pretty much handles it.
We did get Einstein asked us one follow-up question here, which we'll hit on, and then we'll do dong picks before heading over to the NBA Live before lockout. And then, of course, I'll be on playback with Josh to sweat out the NBA games afterwards. But Einstein says, what are our thoughts on the Rangers today? Pretty good lefty bats, and Miller has had issues against the lefties. So Texas Rangers, who are 7.3% owned. The problem I have with Texas, and once again, not a team I'm outright fading, but why it's kind of a nondescript one for me, is that the ownership is there on Texas and at a level I think is about appropriate, where we've got 7.3% ownership, 7% top stack odds. What's my Texas exposure? It's probably gonna be like right in line with the field. 4% ownership to Texas. So I'm a little bit underweight there. If you're telling me they're going to be 7% owned at lock and my choices are to be overweight, underweight, or at the field, for me, it's going to be slightly underweight to the Texas Rangers.
I agree, but I also see teams like Texas and Houston, Colorado, maybe a little bit lower owned than we're projecting, and the teams like San Diego and Toronto even higher owned.
Here's where it doesn't matter because it's not the case. Here's where I would be more apt to get to Texas if Bryce
if Miller were getting love. Yeah, I'm with you. There's just Texas is in a really hard spot and their pitcher isn't getting love. So I'm with you. It's almost not needed on this slate. Doesn't mean they can't be good because they are really good, but nothing about them really per our tools makes them look good.
Yeah, Bryce Miller just 2% projected owned. So once again, I'm going to check Discord. No questions coming in from there. So let's do our dong picks for the night before wrapping up here, Matt. Who homers today? Who goes yard? Yesterday was I had Julio for my home run pick, and he ended up going yard. Do you remember your home run pick?
Yeah, I do. It was Bregman. He hit into 4 like ground ball double play type hits, so he did not homer.
Yeah, double plays are usually don't lead to homers. Double plays.
No, they don't.
I almost always forget my home run pick after we do the show, but I think a lot of people ended up betting Julio yesterday because I got a bunch of people were sending me betting slips with Julio Rodriguez yesterday. So that was what made me remember that I had Julio for yesterday's slate. Who are you going to go with today? The only caveat is no players at Coors Field because that's a pussy move. So no picking Coors Field, Matt. Who are you picking a homer outside of Colorado?
I'm going to go with a guy to get off the schneid a little bit. Give me Yordan Alvarez. I like Houston here. He's not going to get a lot of love. He's cheap on DraftKings. Give me Air Jordan.
I'm going right back to the well. Julio Rodriguez. So I don't have a ton of Seattle exposure, but the one player I am getting to in lineups, I have 19% of Julio Rodriguez right now. So Julio Rodriguez picking him to hit his second homer of the season today. And now let's go into chat and see what people are picking to go for dong picks out of the YouTube chat here. We got Michael Roundtree said Josh Rojas. J.R. Whopper, he's going with Bregman today. So he's going to chase your pick from yesterday, Matt. We got Junior Whopper going with Bregman. Devin Neiman's going with Salvador Perez. We've got Andre B going Michael Harris. I've got a good amount of Michael Harris as a one-off. I wouldn't mind that. Malukar's going with Kyle Tucker. Sotek's going with Aaron and Judge. Been a really rough start to the year for Judge. And believe it or not, the Yankees, after their crazy out start to the season, not even at the top of the AL East anymore with some recent struggles. Seth Brown for Mine Stadium. Slim Lancaster going with Juan Soto. SportsWiz says anybody but Judge. So he's just taking the field. He's saying that some other player will homer. Not Aaron Judge, though. Flex is going with Jesse Winker. Arcathelza is going Matt Olson. Gang Green also Scott Soto. Andy Millman is going with Austin Riley. The boy from Cali's got Alex Verdugo. Haunted Joe's got Austin Wells. Let's see, is there any other names that are popping up pretty frequently? A couple people picked Michael Bush. I saw Michael Bush pop up from a couple people. Skittles just threw him in. So that is going to do it for us today, guys. If you have not done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget, $5 for the MLB lineup generator when you sign up using that link we have below, promo code DOUBLE. That also gets you access to Discord. You can hang out in Discord with us and ask us questions whenever you want. So hope to see you guys in Discord when you sign up for the lineup generator. Other than that, good luck tonight. Hope you guys win some GPPs. I'll see you in playback in an hour. Peace out.